Hi, everyone. I'm Katherine Sanders from Sanders Consulting, and this is the start of my interview series about the Surgeon General's framework. Today, my colleague, Dr. Patrick Farrell, is helping me out, and I'm going to turn it over to him because he's going to interview me.
Hi, everyone. As Catherine said, I'm Patrick Farrell. I'm a retired faculty member from Lehigh University. I've held a variety of senior administrative posts at Lehigh and at University of Wisconsin-Madison. That's perhaps enough about my history. And I'm really happy to get a chance to interview or talk with Catherine about this the Surgeon General's framework. So let me start, Catherine. Tell me a little bit about your background. And I know you've sort of been in this broad field for a long time, but tell me a little bit about kind of how you got to the things you've been doing in the past. And then we'll get into how that affects your perspective on the Surgeon General's framework.
I am a human factors engineer, and my specialty is sociotechnical systems. So essentially, the health and well-being of people at work. Um, And I'm really grateful, Pat, for you to be talking with me about this today because, as you know, because we collaborate a lot, when the Surgeon General's framework came out in 2022, when I discovered it, I was over the moon happy, right? Like, look at the CDC putting out this lovely, flowery diagram about workplace well-being. And the reason I'm excited about it is because it is what my whole discipline's about, right? And so I read it and I read the report and I thought, oh, that's so good that the government is like bringing together these decades of research and simplifying it and making it into something that people can kind of get a hold of. And I spend most of my time helping organizations do just that or teaching it in the college classroom. So this is near and dear to my heart, and I'm so glad the Surgeon General's office came out with this model. I'm very excited about it.
This, at first glance, I think to most of us, this model seems very comprehensive. There's a lot of elements to it. Given your background as you kind of come to the model, what stands out for you? What do you find most interesting? Perhaps a little bit surprising. Um, Tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, with the background you were just describing, your perspective on this framework.
Well, one of the things I like the most about it that I hadn't ever seen in any other framework, including my own, and I will share my own in a couple minutes. But one of the things I like the most is that worker voice and equity is in the center of it. And I really find that compelling on a lot of levels. I think it's nearly impossible for an organization to promote the health of its people unless people can express what they need, right? And we
Mhm.
have these huge variance between individuals and even within a person over time about what we need. I mean, it might be that we can work in a certain way with a particular capacity when we're in our early 30s. And then if we have a child who gets ill, then our own capacity changes radically, right? Same
Mhm.
person over time can have a very different working experience. And so without the worker voice and equity, without knowing what people are needing, it's almost impossible for systems to promote health. So I see you nodding. Have you seen this as in your, leadership experience, how things change over time and how people have to keep updating what they need?
Oh, I would say definitely, and at least again in my experience, even more broadly than sort of the topical area of their own health, their professional development. I don't want to get off health as kind of the central topic here, but in a whole variety of ways in which people develop throughout their, at least in my experience, their work lives, so to speak. Their needs change, their interests change, as you say. Family demands, other things that impact how they work change. And I think it's challenging even for organizations who espouse to want to be flexible to actually be flexible enough to accommodate some of that change with time. Um, but of course, there's plenty of organizations that I think we both see where that's doesn't seem to be an objective or even appear to be a very important thing for the organization to do. So
Mhm.
I totally agree that that's a critical part. And unfortunately, it feels like some organizations are a long ways away from that.
True, very true. But that's part of why I was so excited to see the CDC actually publishing something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that when I think of this model, I'm gonna share a systems model that is not my own. It's something that people who work with me see me use a lot. This Michael Goodman's systems thinking model in an iceberg shape about the events that we live that are above the waterline that we can all see and relate to, and then the patterns and trends that lead to those events that aren't something that we see every day, but you see organizations measuring them, right? And then there are the structures that lead to those patterns and trends that ultimately end up in an event. And then at the very bottom of this iceberg, the thing that is the foundation of this whole systems thinking process is these mental models that lead us to design, in this case, work structures in a particular way that result in patterns and trends and events like someone leaving an institution or someone getting ill or a job that is hard to fill because no one will apply for it, right? And when I think of the Surgeon General's model, or the Surgeon General's framework, rather, I think of it down here on this level of mental models. So I think of that beautiful flower as like these beliefs and backed up by literally decades of research about what humans need in order to be healthy at work. And I would see that down here. But what we have to do then is we look at these areas, and you were focused on opportunities for growth a moment ago, and that's human nature. All humans need that, right? All humans need to feel
Mm-hmm.
safe. All humans need to feel like they belong. All humans need to feel like they can make achievements or feel in control of their lives, or at least part of their lives. So if we believe this to be true, and the research tells us it has everything to do with human health, then what does the organization need to look like, right, in order to promote those experiences for workers while staying in business? And this
Mm-hmm.
is the thing, right? It's going to look different in different industries. It's going to look different for different organizations. It's going to look different for different groups of people, depending on where they are regionally and culturally. But these structures are the things that the Surgeon General's model then will help us develop. So what do opportunities for growth look like in our organization, and how can we make sure people have access to them? What does equity look like in our organization? How can we design in processes that promote equity and make sure that people have a voice and a sense of real autonomy about how they work, when they work, where they work from, whatever is possible in our industry or our sector.
Well, this seems like a very logical way to think about, a system. I will say, with my experience, a lot of organizations seem to rarely get below the first or second level you've got there of either seeing what happens, maybe let's try to make sure that doesn't happen again, and that's about as far as we get. Without overgeneralizing, can you help us understand why is it either difficult or not common to go to those more fundamental levels of structures, mental models? Is it more common than I think, or is it what would you say are sort of the real challenges for organizations to dig beyond just, as they say, prevention? Let's make sure we don't do that same mistake one more time.
Well, I think that's a fabulous question. And I think we have like this measurement culture in organizations now that grew over the last 50
Hmm.
years, where we're always trying to anticipate what might happen, right?
Hmm.
And we've developed all sorts of measures to anticipate and to track and to graph and to
Hmm.
fill
Hmm.
ourselves with all sorts of data.
Hmm.
But I think the structures that lead to those patterns and trends go largely unquestioned. It's
Hmm.
an odd sort of phenomena, but I've seen it across many sectors, whether it's healthcare or manufacturing or whether it's education even. We have an idea of the way things get done in this job. Well,
Mhm.
this job of physician means that you're going to be on call. This job of physician means you're going to work 70 hours a week minimum. This job is da da da. That's what it means. I've had people literally say this to me. This is what it means to be a physician. And
Mhm.
I think to myself, and sometimes I say it out loud, well, you know, that's all made up, right? I mean, like,
Mhm.
the jobs we work in are all made up. There are no exceptions to that. You can't pick a job out in the field and it comes to you whole. What humans have done is we've clustered things together. And now I'm going to show a different graphic. You know, Pat, you know me. I got all sorts of pictures for things. This is my healthy work framework. You can find this on my website. This is my own framework. Um, but the reason I'm showing it here is because I want to talk about this work systems model. So this star right here in the center of my healthy work framework is not something I made up. This is from Michael Smith and Pascal Sanfort. But this work systems model explains that we've got in any work system, people doing a combination of tasks that have been clustered into something called a job. And then we give them technologies to work with, whether that's equipment or ideas like Lean or Six Sigma or profit sharing, all these different things, these ideas of how we work, our technologies. And then we ask our people to work in this physical environment, but also the social environment that comes from that. And then within an organization's policies and procedures, reward structures, and this is the whole system of work. And so when people question the structures, I would say that these things here, these four elements are the structures of work. But we tend to focus on what the humans are doing. And so we're like, okay, we want everyone to be safer.
Mhm.
So be safer.
I'll put up some signs. That really helps.
Yeah. And we're going to measure how safe you are. We're going to
Mhm.
keep measuring it and we'll keep showing you. But if we have chronic understaffing, which leads to chronic overwhelm, so people have too much work to do and too little time to do it, we definitely know that they're likely to rush, right? And
Mhm.
to cut corners because that's the only way you'd get this series of tasks done in a timely fashion.
Well, I would say
So,
particularly if you overlay that with the expectations, I'm not sure if that's in task organization, that you
yeah,
must get these done. Leaving them unfinished or incomplete is not acceptable. So kind of the volume of work with sort of the overall, as I would expect, the overall culture of what happens when we have too much to do. Uh,
absolutely. Understaffing is one of the biggest risk factors for accidents and near misses and mistakes,
mhm.
right? And injuries and illness. But until you look at that structure of how the job is built and then how the reward structure or the expectations are formed, then that's the structure of that iceberg, right? And that leads to the patterns and trends and the events that we see. So the structures of work here, I think most people take them as a given. You know, we have 4 nurses on this shift and they have to care for all of these patients and make no mistakes. But that isn't a way to stay safe.
So let me ask you kind of the bigger question, which whether we look at it in kind of the context you were just describing, or back to the picture of the that the Surgeon General has. So for an individual who would like to begin, recognizes there are some to many shortcomings in sort of their own sort of workspace that keeps it from being a really healthy environment, whether for them personally or perhaps colleagues, others, people who haven't yet joined us, but would be likely to. So a variety of people. My question a little bit is, how would someone get started, or where is the
Mm.
opportunity space to sort of really begin to make impact whether as an individual, small group, something. I mean, it feels, at least at the outset, like changing the organization is a tall order. Maybe that is what has to happen, but if me and three of my friends are saying, "Wow, this isn't working very well," we don't may not feel very well equipped to say, "Okay, tomorrow the organization will be different." But hopefully, we're not helpless, and that there are some places we can begin. So, can you help us think about what might be some of those places, even if ultimately maybe the organization does need to change, but perhaps we can't quite do that today.
Well, that's actually the reason I wanted to start this series of interviews, right? Because it's fabulous to have the Surgeon General's framework.
Mhm,
And I do see it as foundational mental models that we can build structures on, or from. But how do you get started? You know, you can't just pick up this thing and just set it on your organization like a template.
mhm,
So I think what matters to me is that people are aware, A, that it exists and it's very well
mhm,
researched.
mhm,
And B, they start to talk about it.
mhm,
So you can use it in your department to talk about, well, what are we strong in already? What are we doing that we want to make sure we keep doing? And then I would challenge the group to start looking at what are the structures. So what are these things about people's daily work experience? I'm going to focus specifically on jobs because I think that is the most overlooked piece of
mm,
that model,
okay.
because we think of jobs as these, that they can't be changed.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, but, if you can look at the jobs that people have and then look at that model and say, well, what are we asking of our people? And what do we know that people need to stay healthy? And then that starts perhaps an evolution. It's not like we tear up all of the job descriptions on Monday and by Friday we figured this thing out, right? It's that over time we can evolve these things. We can keep asking people, how is it going? We can look at the jobs themselves for risk factors, and we can actually predict which jobs are likely to have patterns of poor health, right?
mhm,
Because of some of the research in the Surgeon General's framework, and then, of course, other research too. So I would just, A, talk about it, B, talk to your colleagues about it,
mhm,
and observe what you're doing right already that's working and try to preserve that. And then uh, I would say the last one would be to look at the jobs themselves, because they're so overlooked and taken for granted that it has to be this way, but it doesn't. It's only
mhm,
this way because we've made it this way.
mhm. Well, that sounds really helpful. I'll echo particularly the first one, which to some listeners may sound like a little bit weak. Talk about it like, okay, what's that going to do? Actually, my experience is that uh, if one can make sort of even the topics headlines of the structure a normal part of conversation, that's a victory. Because right now, most of those are not things people talk about. And if they become sort of at least a thing that we're willing to talk about it, then it makes it much easier to say, well, when we start this new unit or we reorganize ourselves, maybe we'd like to get someone who knows something about this, help us think this through.
Mm.
Years ago, we said, well, what do we need that for? We know how to assign tasks to people. That's not that hard. Maybe we want to think a little bit more broadly and incorporate some of these ideas since they've been at least put on the table, even if there's been no specific assignment that this needs to be fixed by tomorrow. So I would really echo that. I realize to a lot of listeners that doesn't sound like much. You haven't changed anything just because you're talking. Actually, if you've made something like that a normal part of conversation, you've already changed quite a bit because it didn't used
Mm-hmm.
to be a normal part of
That's right.
conversation.
To even be aware that work impacts health and to care
Mhm,
about it, that's a huge
mhm.
step right there.
Well, so that's I really like that because as you know, I'm a pretty practical person. I'm always trying to think about how is it that whatever level we might find ourselves in an organization, we can at least try to make some impact. If I'm not a C-suite person, I may not be able to change the organization all by myself. But I like the idea, yeah, but I can help, hopefully with some friends, begin to nudge things in positive directions. So I think that's really helpful. So let me ask, kind of to follow on that, are there other kinds of guidance or resources you might suggest people might want to take a look at? Certainly, the Surgeon General's report is available. You can download it, go get it, read it. It's really interesting. Are there other things that you suggest people take a look at if they're thinking, this sounds really cool, like to see what kind of impact I can make in my organization? What other kinds of things might I want to learn about that would be helpful?
So I'll put a link to some websites, including my own and yours, in with this video. And then also I would just invite people to watch some of the other videos in this series to get ideas, to learn from people who are in very diverse positions, what they've already tried and how it's going. You might find someone, you might be in manufacturing, but you get inspired by something that someone in the nonprofit sector is doing, right? And I just want to encourage people. You and I also have a membership group called Leading System Change. The whole intent there is to bring people together who are from diverse backgrounds or in diverse contexts so that they can support and inspire each other. So you don't have to figure this out all by yourself. And in fact, we can't. I have a PhD in this area, and it's not as if I can outline the way things should be, but there are processes that we use, and there are risk factors that we can identify. And then there are people that we can ask for support from and inspiration from. And so this series is meant to be one of those resources.
That's great. One of the things you brought to mind as you were mentioning that is a phrase that it may be, it feel like something you don't expect to hear back when I used to be a provost at the university, but would like to say of these kinds of activities, it's a work in progress and always will be, which is not to say that we should be frustrated or impatient or feel like success is out of our reach. To the contrary, some success is always within reach, and there's more. There's more to be done. So I mean, I think sometimes listeners think, oh, you all kind of know how to move from our fixed position to the new and correct final position, and this sort of sense of change, we can just be done with it. And I think both of us would agree that's not really how it works. How it really works is you hopefully start on a very positive note of change, success, occasional failure, but it's always a work in progress. And
Well,
again, go ahead.
sorry, and because the system is always shifting, that star is always changing, new technologies, new demands on the organization, new people coming and going. There is no way to get it done and keep it there, right? And so this processes we build, like you were describing, that keep bringing us to the next level of hopeful health. Those are the processes we put in place, and then we keep evolving them also, right? So,
And
yeah.
many of the people that I've been involved with who may be the most outspoken about how unhealthy an environment we have, for them, the notion that we're moving is not a total success, but is very heartening because in many cases they haven't seen that. So even if we all agree the work is not done, we have a ways to go, the sense that we're on our way and we aren't stopping when we get to the next modest level of achievement. I think even for a lot of the folks in our organizations who all recognize we're not where we would like to be, but they find that incredibly encouraging that yes, but we're not giving up just because we made this modest achievement. We're actually intend to continue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
thanks. This has been very fun. Is there anything else you'd sort of like to sort of add in, given a chance to expand on your own work and how it might connect to the Surgeon General's report?
oh, I just want to thank you for interviewing me so I can try to make some of these connections and help people, because my job is what my job is to help people do this sort of thing. I get to meet a lot of innovative people, and they don't necessarily get to meet each other. And so
True,
I
true,
appreciate you helping
true.
me with this interview series so that we can connect more innovators and more change agents with each other. Because it can be, I think you were just mentioning that people who, would get hopeful just seeing any movement, right? It can be
Mhm,
really disheartening
mhm.
to be a change agent in an organization and feel like you've been working hard and haven't been making progress,
That's right.
right? And
Yep.
so obviously I can't control what any organization does, but I can help people give each other support. So I hope
Mhm.
that this series gives people a sense that they're not alone in trying to make health promoting changes, and that it is hard work, but perhaps the government is helping us gain some traction
True,
here,
true.
which would be fabulous. And so thank you, Pat, for helping me with these conversations.
Well, thanks. Been a fun discussion, and I hope listeners will get involved in the discussion. If you have something to contribute or opinions, you'll share them. And certainly, we're always open to questions and further discussion.
Thank you.